If you have ever experienced feelings of depression, anxiety, difficulty focusing, lack of motivation, and let's be honest, who of us hasn't experienced that at some point in our lives, this episode is going to be so chock full of resources for you. I get to sit down with Olivia June Williams, and we share intimately about part of her background and her story. She's had some pretty dark tragedies that have happened to her family members, one of which is a household name that we all know, one of our favorite and most beloved actors, and how their tragic passing set her and her husband on a trajectory of creating a product to help impact mental health. We're going to talk all about neurotransmitters. I want you to walk away from this episode with a deep understanding of the beautiful chemical messengers that we all have in our brains, what they do, how we can use them, how we can benefit them. And I'm so excited for her to share about the product that her and Zach, her husband, created. That's one of my favorite products. It's natural, it's clean, it makes your brain feel so good. I love it. I take it before I film episodes and do many other things. And you're going to love this one. Enjoy. I'm so looking forward to this episode. This is an opportunity and a chance for so many of us to learn tools for things that we all have struggled with, whether it's anxiety, depression, anger, difficulty focusing, or a lack of motivation. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Olivia June Williams, and we're going to have a really great in-depth conversation. Olivia has a family member that we all have grown to know and love as one of the world's most favorite and loved actors. His tragic and shocking passing touched us all, and it set Olivia and her husband on a mission to make one of my favorite natural products that can help people with their mental health. Olivia, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you being here. I know this can be a tough topic, I'm sure. And I'm really excited to, share with everyone how this set you on a path. And like I said, your product that I have just loved. I know we're going to go into a lot of details about that. But first, if we could, I just want to touch on a little bit about who you are and a bit about your family and some of the things that you guys have gone through and how this impacted you and your husband, Zach's life.
My backstory is that I lost my sister to suicide, my older sister to suicide when I was 10 and she was 23. She was getting a master's in child psychology. And it was a completely devastating event for my family. But the stigma of mental health and suicide was so strong that for about a decade it lived in secrecy, never actually said out loud that how she died, that it was an accident. For me, I really struggled with my mental health through my growth, and it was a topic that was near and dear. I saw every kind of different doctor. I saw great psychologists. I saw not so great psychologists. I saw psychiatrists. I saw all different kinds of support systems. But for me, it was all a learning experience. I ended up being diagnosed with ADHD, depression. They missed a diagnosis for anxiety, which I didn't really realize that I was suffering from until much, much later in life when I had gone on to start a tech company, a fast growing tech company, and it was growing and thriving. And kind of the weight of the world of all of that became enormous. And then I met my husband, my now husband, and both of us had gone through a divorce. And Zach, his mental health was really struggling when we met, through the devastating loss of his father, which was so similar and so different from my own loss. Zach had struggled both from the loss himself and then the enormous kind of grief of the world weight on him as well. Because I had gone through decades of learning about how to take care of my mental health, and I was really, really thriving with the support of amino acids and nutritional practices, diet changes, lifestyle changes. I've been off medication for years and years, and had really come up with systems that really helped me thrive despite all of the stress and trauma and tragedy that I had gone through. So I introduced Zach to basically my program, my protocol, and the first and most important thing that he tried was GABA support for the anxiety. He would wake up with like a big weight on his chest every morning. And within, one day of taking these supplements that were suggested for him, he was that weight was lifted, and he was able to start taking some of those actions that were able to kind of build on a mental hygiene practice, is what we call it now. But really a holistic look at how are we taking care of our mental health. And that's been like our complete mission is, how do we make this more accessible to more people? How do we make this information more accessible? How do we make it easier for people to navigate? How do we increase the education for people to understand, like, hey, what's actually going on with me when I'm suffering like this? Like, what are the functions within my body? Because I feel like we grow up, we know so much about the world. We know our U.S. history. We know, we figure out how to do our taxes. But nobody teaches us, like, what are neurotransmitters? And unless you're like majoring in science, and gone down like a nutritional path, or, even a lot of doctors don't learn about the nutritional side of things. They get maybe a 30-minute class on nutrition. And so it seems to be like one of the biggest core elements that make a big impact on our lives and our well-being. And we wanted to make it fun, approachable, easy, to start making some of those habits and integrating them into your life.
Love that. I mean, you guys have definitely done just that. I love your product. I know we're going to delve deep into it in a little bit towards the later end of the podcast, so make sure you guys stay tuned. But yeah, such a good point. The brain is fascinating. The brain is so magical. And I think for so long, so many of us just saw it as this piece of us. And now that people are talking more about mental health, getting to understand these neurotransmitters, these chemical messengers in our brain that are responsible for so many of the feelings that we have, and understanding the names, right? Like, name them so you can tame them, understand them, work with them. It's something that we should all be learning in elementary school. This is such a piece of something that impacts our entire lives, how we show up in the world, that is so crucial. And I love some of the stuff that you guys have done on your website. Your blogs are so fun. They take the science and make it really, really easy to understand. So I love what you guys are doing. And, I think just touching on some of the things you said, and I think, with your father-in-law, Robin Williams, passing, I think such a tragedy. And I know that part of what we all knew and loved about him is he was so relatable, right? He was this pure love and light and energy and brought so much to everyone. But deep down inside, he had these inner struggles and battles that I think a lot of, obviously, people who didn't know him well weren't aware of. And I think that is in so many of us, right? I think so many of the people that show up the most loving and the most light have the deepest struggles and darkness. And I think that, if I can say one of the blessings that could come from something like that is I think he opened up the door for people to talk about these things, to really define mental health as this invisible struggle that people can be having that you have no idea is going on. And so to really come to everyone with compassion and understand you have no idea what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, I think in the world, especially when we look at everyone in the media and even on social media, people that you actually know, we see the highlight reel. We see people smiling. We see the best moments of everyone's lives. And it can be really hard to feel connected to the struggle. And so when we are struggling, when we are, in our sadness, it's really hard to feel not alone in that. So something that, I really became so passionate about when I found, went through my sister's journal. So it was just like this theme of loneliness. And I became like my greatest fear of like what loneliness is, like the scariest possible thing that can happen to you. I had always felt like this deep loneliness, and I felt like I had so many friends, but I felt so alone always. And I think a huge part of that is just not letting ourselves be fully seen. 25% of millennials will say that they don't have a single friend. And that stat goes way higher for people in Gen Z. And people used to have three close friends. Back in the 70s, they did this research, and now people are very fortunate if they have one close friend. So we have this huge loneliness epidemic that's happening. It was, a few years back, 6 years back, it was named the #1 health epidemic. It's the #1 predictor of your mortality is actually social connection. So my first company that I started is actually a social discovery app specifically focused for women, to help women meet new friends, because I feel like when you have that connection, when you have community, you have everything. You can get everything. You can find a job, you can find a place to live, you can find a meal. But what we need at that our deepest core is that connection. So really, it's like a holistic thing. And I think, for people who are in the public eye, it can often be one of the loneliest jobs that ever existed.
Again, we're living in a time where so many people share their highlight reel, right? It's social media. We all do it. And again, we have like in us these shadows, these struggles. We all have them. We all experience them. I think in a lot of ways we've learned to distract ourselves from them rather than feel them. I think a lot of people look at these feelings as something that makes us separate, when in actuality, when we can be vulnerable enough to share these, it can be our greatest connectors for friendships. I'm curious how you feel about that. I know you're a mom of two kids. Like, I feel like being a mom can be very lonely, even though you're surrounded by people. It's just you're not getting that deep connection.
Something that I've really leaned into as part of just my personal ethos is, just complete and total authenticity, like complete transparency. Like this morning, I almost cried trying to get my kids into the car to go to school. The gate wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out how to get my car out. And I'm trying to FaceTime my husband who's out of town. And, it was just complete pandemonium. And I was like, okay, I have to figure this out. Let's take a deep breath. And how do I recover from this, extreme amount of chaos, extreme amount of overwhelm? And, I reach in like my toolkit that I have in my mind. I start some breathing, I take a mood chew. I love a big stretch, power pose. And you can regroup and you can recover from those when you have those in your toolkit. But it's being honest about those moments. Like, I don't have it completely together always. Sometimes, I was just saying to you, I just have it together enough. And I think us lowering those standards that we might have for ourselves. We don't have to be Pinterest perfect moms. And we don't have to be like the iconic girl boss CEO on the cover of a magazine who also has it all together. And like, there are just amazing ways to live where you're just being fully authentically yourself and sharing that transparently, not feeling that shame, like releasing that shame. I used to be so embarrassed because it was such a thing to talk about suicide. And once I started opening up about it and talking about it, that actual wound within myself healed. And it's not a pain anymore for me. It's actually an opportunity now for me to extend my hand to anyone who has experienced a tragedy or has been in that place themselves, to say like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, we're humans together.
Absolutely. Have you read Michael Singer's books on like Untethered Soul?
I haven't.
So he talks about this thing called samskaras in these books, and you just touched on it. Like when we have these feelings, like, I'm so sorry about your sister's suicide, where we hold these feelings inside of us, we don't talk about them. It's like they remain locked in there. They become physical memories of the emotion. And when we open up to them, when we talk about them, they can pass through our bodies, right? They're always there as a memory, but it's not that challenging trigger that it could be when we hold on to it. And I just think that's one of the things I fell in love with you when I met you at the event. Like, just instantly, we went into those real conversations. I forget, we were laughing about like how we put contacts in our phone. It's like lady with blonde hair, like meeting all the friends in new schools and things like that. And I have found in the last couple of years showing up that way, is what has made some of the best friendships. I felt like I didn't have the community that I wanted and craved as a mom, as a woman, as a human being. And so I just decided to show up as the friend that I wanted to be, right? Loving, real, authentic, and just going all in and realizing that some people were probably going to shy away from me, and that was okay because they're not my people. And I think that's one of the really important takeaways here is whoever you are is who you need to bring to every relationship, because it feels so good when people love you for the genuine you, rather than having these fake connections. And I think that's a lot of the struggle behind living in the social media era. It's like you can have 10,000 friends, followers, but nobody truly knows you, and that can be the worst pain.
I feel like there's this magic thing that you can kind of do as a mom, that someone did for me. And I felt so honored when this woman did this for me, and she invited me over, and her house was a complete disaster. Like, it was so messy. It was just like, I was like, oh my gosh, she really likes me. Like, we're really friends. Like, she counts me as a real friend. Like, she invited me to her house when it's completely trashed.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't apologize for it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's how I knew that she really cared about me, and she trusted me and felt safe, like, in our relationship. And we didn't know each other that well. We had like had some conversations, but there's that magic thing you can do is like invite someone into your mess, where you don't feel like you have to be perfect. You don't have to be like putting on this show for each other. And then suddenly, like, that's where that authentic friendship comes into play.
I love that. I have a couple friendships like that, and they're my favorite because it gives you permission to do the same. It's like seeing someone let down their guard just allows you to exhale and be like, okay, I can be me. And so we can all have the opportunity to be that first person in that relationship to invite someone into our mess, because that's what starts those friendships. I want to segue a little bit into, we're both moms. Before we got on and recorded here, we shared our crazy mornings, right? Our husbands are both traveling. Your nanny's sick, my daughter's sick. Like, it's just the reality of momhood. And so I want to touch on some of your past with, going into parenting actually with, some anxiety, some ADHD that you've shared so openly. Thank you for doing that. And maybe how that has impacted or showed up in your journey as a mom. And then would also love, you mentioned your toolbox. So any tools are always great to share. I know we'll talk about your product too, but just, anything else in addition to that.
The greatest undiagnosed population with ADHD and the fastest growing diagnosed population is women in their 30s and 40s, mostly because a lot of the symptoms that we typically look for in ADHD get overlooked in young girls. There's a lot of masking that happens, and the symptoms are just so different between boys and girls often, particularly in the area of like hyperactivity. So I have ADHD, inattentive. I'm not a hyperactive person, and I'm actually quite calm, as you might see in my being. But there's a lot of things that came to struggle, and a lot of that is that overwhelm. I think maybe the best way to share about it, my toolkit, and how I deal with all of these things, anxiety, ADHD, a proclivity for like low serotonin, depression, is a little bit about my personal routine. Maybe I'll just walk you, like, what did I do to prepare for this podcast, despite all of the things going on. So a huge part of it, is hydration. I literally did not prepare for this, so I just happen to have it here. This is super authentic. So I've got my water, I have my coffee, two things essential.
Both important, both very important in the mom toolkit.
3 cup of coffee morning. So I usually try to stick to 1 cup of coffee. I try to give myself 90 minutes from the moment I wake up to when I have my first cup of coffee. A huge part of that is because we have a natural spike in cortisol when we wake up, and that's part of our waking, how our body wakes up. So I try to give myself that time, even though like I can be half blind. But I turn on some music in the morning for my kids and myself. I try to dance around. I shake my body out. So I'm moving, I'm loosening up, I'm laughing. I'm trying to be silly and really touch into the element of play. Play is a huge thing for humans. And I think it's one of the really beautiful things that we get as mothers is the opportunity to like play. And something you don't naturally do when you're not a mom. It's hard to introduce that without those silly little rascals. Bringing in that element of play, stretching with my kids. I try to eat protein in the morning for breakfast. A huge big thing as part of our biology is that, if you can really stack your protein in the morning, like 30 to 40 grams of protein, it actually changes the entire trajectory of your mood for the day. So like protein and fibers in the morning. So like veggies and eggs was me today. And then, got my kids out. I told you about my breathing and some of my power posing to like calm my nervous system a little bit. I took some of my mood chews. I always take a mood chew and attention chew before I do like anything social or podcasts or sit down and do any work. Because a huge part of my struggle with attention and focus And also, anxiety can really go in tandem. It can be hard to discern one from the other. For a long time, I was actually in denial that I had ADHD and was like, no, I think it was a misdiagnosis. I just had anxiety. And the more I really learned about the condition and how it presents in women, like the moms at the end of the day where you just like, you cannot have another person touch you. Like you're just like, you are overtouched, you are overstimulated, and making sure that we're taking care of those elements. So those are like big parts of just that set me up for a really great day. And I have to do those and integrate them. I take, some other supplements specifically focused on digestion. So I take probiotics. I take omegas, which are amazing for all parts of our body, but particularly our mental health. Our brain is 60% fat and it doesn't make its own fat and it doesn't take fat from your other body. It just consumes the fat that you're eating. And when we consume too much of the wrong fats, it can cause inflammation and poorer performance of our brain. So that's a huge element of things that we have to think about. So that's kind of how I prepare for my day and like how I integrate all of my habits for increasing my mental health for the day, increasing my productivity and my ability to, do all the things that I do with 2 businesses, 2 kids, and no nanny today this week.
So many great nuggets there. I took one of the mood shoes before this podcast too. I take one before every podcast. I love them. I'm so excited for you guys to learn more about them. We're going to talk about it in a few minutes. They're incredible. But I want to touch on a few of the things that you mentioned there. So if you don't mind me asking, how old are your kids? Because I know they're pretty little.
2 and 4.
2 and 4. Okay, so you are in the thick of like physical, emotional momhood. Ours are 7, 11, and 12. We're like on the cusp of some birthdays, so I always have to think through that. So we're both like in it, right? And because I want this to really hit home for some of the moms in here that have some little kids, and then also some messages for people who don't have kids. The morning time is so crucial in how your day transpires, right? You feel that clearly. So especially when our kids are this young and at the ages of 2 and 4, I mean, they need you for everything, right? Making breakfast, feeding them, maybe changing diapers still. I'm not sure if your younger one's in diapers. So you could easily wake up, get out of bed, and hit the ground in reaction mode. It'd be so easy for that to happen, and it probably happens to about 90% of moms, if not more. But you are very intentional with managing that cortisol spike that we all have in the morning. It's called the dawn effect, DAWN, dawn. So it's our natural body's rhythm for waking up, our circadian rhythms. And that time, I call it my magical morning. It's so powerful in how the rest of your day goes. And especially, I think, for moms, this is going to majorly impact how we show up for our kids. Our kids feel us, they sense us, they feed off of our energy. So this is one of the most important things I think that we can do as moms. I love that you wait on your coffee. I think that's so important. I also think there's times, for me, if I'm feeling like a bit anxious or high wired, I try to even just lean on decaf. I think it does produce some of those fight or flight chemicals in me, at least. I think I'm pretty sensitive to it. But I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the breath work that you do. I think breathing is such a great practice, especially in the morning, either meditating or breathing, just really sitting in as much stillness as you can in the reality of raising little kids. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what you do for that.
If I'm able to wake up before my kids, I try to do a meditation. I recently, I guess in the last year, learned TM. It's just transcendental meditation, which is a mantra-based meditation. And I try to do that as soon as I wake up. I just kind of like sit up a little bit and, do that. And it really, the cool thing about TM is that it can is researched to be more energizing than the deep sleep that you get. So that's what it does for your brain on the scientific measurement space. That can really help with a lot of like sleep quality issues. And sleep quality is like an enormous thing for me because sometimes it's quality over quantity that you get as a mom. So breathing, I try to do it with my kids. I try to actually get them to do it because it can be really good for them, especially when they start to get a little wound up. But I really just try to get deep belly breaths if I don't have the ability to like do some counting or anything, and try to exhale longer than I'm inhaling. So that's the really most simplistic. Or I do like a simple box breath where, you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 8. That's my kind of go-to. But I think it's also in that movement. And when I get dancing around, I'm breathing and I'm not thinking about anything. I'm singing along to silly songs. I'm trying to make my kids laugh. I'm trying to like get the mood on the right foot of the day. And so that just kind of integrates. When you're moving, you're breathing.
That's huge. And I love that you anchor to the word play. I think that's so big. Like one of the things I do before I get out of bed is I set my word, my intention for the day. And it's always a feel good word. And it usually comes after a check in with myself. So, like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, what would be the opposite of that? Or, I'm really big on tuning into myself and asking myself the questions because we all have the answers in it that we need, right? We just need to listen more and get that voice louder. But it's like, okay, how am I going to get through this day? Okay, what do I need to get through this day? Music, fun, play. Especially for those of us with kiddos, it's such an incredible opportunity. Like you said, you get your kids to breathe with you. And I think as moms, there's so much of our self-care routine that we tend to easily let go of when we have kids. And if you can realize that you're role modeling for our children when we're doing these things, they'll often come along and it's going to help them as well. The play is huge. That's so fun. We have one of my favorite things in our house, it's so silly, is our Google, the music player, because it's so easy to just yell out, okay, Google, play whatever song. Like our mornings are full of music. And you don't have to have kids to choose to incorporate play in the morning, right? We all know that we do so well when we connect to that inner kid in us. And get silly, be silly. You live alone, like even easier. Nobody's watching you. Do whatever the hell makes you feel so good in the morning. You think of if everybody in the world did that and then showed up to work, like how fun it would be.
What if we had everyone doing the Macarena before work? Because I'm doing
Yes.
the Macarena before work.
Yes. Like, why not? Who cares? You're all going to work anyway.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so silly. Okay, I want to delve into your product because I'm obsessed with it. And I really want people to get a take-home understanding of neurotransmitters. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I encourage people to check out your blog or on the website. I think it's under the section Learn More. It's an incredible insight into neurotransmitters and what these all mean. And they're names that a lot of people have heard of. So just kind of overarching, Olivia, if you want to hold up the packet again, or the tin. I love the tin in the marketing too. So these are the mood chews. I want to talk about how you guys chose the name as well, because I love that story. And then let's delve into some of the neurotransmitters that we're preparing the mind for with these chews and what they mean. So first, the name. How'd you guys select this name?
Him is actually quite an intentional choice. It's actually Zach's middle name. His dad chose it because it sounded vaguely Welsh, is the story behind it. But Zach and I turned it into an acronym that stands for Prepare Your Mind. And really that is our intention, is to give you products that prepare your mind and body to handle all of the things that come at it and actually to optimize in its functional state. So we're very much in like the preventative and also like quick acute action. So the mood chews are designed for stress, worry, overwhelm as a non-diagnosable thing, is feelings of anxiousness. So, anxiety is a medical condition. And if you are struggling with it, you should definitely talk with a medical provider. But I encourage everyone to seek healing, natural steps prior to bringing out the like big guns of pharmaceuticals. But everybody has their own journey and everyone needs their own things. And we're not anti-pharma in any way. Everyone's journey is unique for their own body. So, but what's in this is GABA and L-theanine. So GABA is both an amino acid and a neurotransmitter. It is your neurotransmitter that is responsible for, in its most simplistic terms in my mind, for bringing you out of fight or flight. So basically sending away the adrenaline, sending away the cortisol and saying like, hey, we're safe, come back to neutral, let's get back to business. The thing is most of us are deficient in GABA these days. So GABA is a natural occurring amino acid found in fermented foods. So kimchi, sauerkraut, pickles, yogurt, kombucha. And so consuming it is is really important. Actually, people who consume lots of fermented foods tend to have lots of significantly less anxiety. I think there was a study that showed that women that ate a cup of yogurt every day had 25% less anxiety than those that didn't. So there are actual scientific research connections around GABA, and it needs to be absorbed orally for it to be really effective and fast acting. So we turned it into a chew. That's what it is. They're all natural.
They're so delicious too. They're so delicious.
They look, they don't look like they came out of a candy processing thing, because they didn't. It's literally, we wanted to have the cleanest possible ingredients. My ethos needs to be clean, because you can't give you sugar when sugar is often the culprit for a lot of our mental health issues. And so by chewing this, it's actually giving you some nourishing GABA. L-theanine is also an amino acid that helps create kind of energy, focus, also calmness. It naturally occurs in green tea. So if you are a person that struggles with anxiety and is looking for a caffeine alternative, when you pair L-theanine with caffeine, it actually works quite well, which is why the green tea element, it's naturally found there, and why you might notice that you're a lot calmer when after drinking a green tea as opposed to a coffee. Because what caffeine does, it's called a GABA agonist, if you will. But what that means is basically it tells your GABA to stop working. And it says, if you imagine it like a bouncer to a club, and it says, all right, adrenaline, cortisol, free reign, GABA, you stand back. You're at the doors here. You're not allowed to come out. And we're going to give all of your stress hormones free reign of your brain. So when you take GABA, if I've ever over-caffeinated, it can actually counteract that over-caffeination. But when you take GABA, it basically changes your bouncer to say, all right, adrenaline, cortisol, you're out, wait here, we don't need you. And so natural stress curve goes like this. Stressful thing happens, your stress hormones peak, and then they go back down. Your GABA sends them away, and you're back down to neutral. So when you're deficient in GABA, what happens is stressful thing happens, and you're here. You don't go back down. Maybe you go down just a little bit, and then another stressful thing happens. It doesn't have to be a big stressful thing, but it keeps climbing and climbing and climbing until you can't fall asleep at night, or you're shaking. You have, all of these rumination thoughts, and you just cannot come down, and it becomes kind of a panic. Supplementing with GABA. Now I've been taking this product for 4 years now. We launched it in 2020, in September 2020, and I've actually seen my natural ability. So when I don't take it, my natural ability to handle stress has completely changed. I actually see and notice a normal stress curve. Like, oh, I got stressed. Like, I felt the stress hormones. And then 10 minutes later, I'm okay. And that's because I've been nourishing myself with these supplements now for years, and completely, have kind of restabilized. I had a big event last night, a big social event that I went to. I take one before I go out because I get social anxiety. And it's kind of, when people ask me what is it equivalent, it's kind of like, drinking maybe a half a glass of wine. Because as we talked about, GABA occurs in fermentation, and alcohol is fermentation. And so there's actually, what's in alcohol is actually encouraging your GABA system. So that's why a lot of people, feel that anxiety go away when drinking, and why we might see self-medicating anxiety with drinking, which we know has a lot of other side effects that are not great for our bodies. Creates all of these other issues because it's also poison. It's not to say that we're going to have to say, like, you have to quit drinking or anything. Like, I had a glass of wine last night. I enjoyed myself. But it's thinking about, how are we medicating, or how are we treating these feelings that we're having? And so I really like to lean on my mood shoes if I'm feeling like super wound up at the end of the day, as opposed to saying, like, okay, now I need to unwind with the wine. I think it's about just finding that balance of what works for you.
I love your analogy, just going back of the bouncer, right? Because I think having this understanding of like what neurotransmitters are, what is it that we're talking about, so we can imagine what they're doing in our brain. And just for anyone who doesn't know or isn't familiar, again, your website is an incredible resource. I love it. But the neurotransmitters are essentially like chemical messengers in our brain. So like Olivia said, you could picture a bouncer, and whoever's on the outside of the club are things that you're not going to feel, and whoever's let in is what you are going to feel. So if the bouncer lets in cortisol, you're going to feel fight or flight and stressed. If the bouncer lets in GABA, you're going to feel a little bit more calm. thank you for touching on the impact of caffeine. I think that's so important for all of us to understand. Caffeine doesn't give us anything. It blocks our ability to feel calm. And so, like you said, it's why a lot of people, it can throw you into feeling more anxious. I've definitely looked at my relationship with caffeine this year. I looked at my relationship with alcohol last year and made some changes. I'm just really intentional when I do choose to have either one. It's been night and day just checking in with like, if I'm already feeling anxious, I'm going to go with decaf. I think just having that moment check in of how we're feeling is so crucial. The neurotransmitters also, and I want to talk a little bit more about other ones that are in your product as well as your new product. But what's really cool about those is that when we're using something like a GABA, you know, you said like can feel like a half a glass of wine. I feel like what it actually feels like to me is if anyone in here is a runner or likes to exercise, when you're using neurotransmitters, you get the kind of feeling you get after you exercise. That's what I get in my mind. So like my body feels really good, my mind feels clear, but I feel relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I have caffeine, my mind feels really clear. I'm really focused, but I'm a little bit too jazzed up with neurotransmitters and like GABA and things like that. I feel so good. I feel so clear, calm, open. Like, would you agree? Is that how you feel when you're on it?
Absolutely. I'm not personally a runner. I would like to be, but it's just never been really my thing. But I love yoga. And so some people will tell us like, oh, it feels like I just did like an hour-long yoga class
Yeah, yeah,
after
same.
taking this. And like we don't always have the luxury of like taking an hour-long yoga class before hopping into a meeting. And so we can't do it while we're sitting in traffic, but we can chew a mood chew. And so we're not meant to be like a replacement of these great habits. What we are meant to be is, a catalyst for helping you do those good habits. And also, when you can't do them, what else do we have to reach for?
And I know on your website, you've got some resources on tyrosine, which is an amino acid that can help promote dopamine. I think a lot of people are hearing and understanding more about dopamine, dopamine depletion. So when people feel like a lack of motivation or a lack of drive, a lot of people are talking about like dopamine addiction, how we seek out these things that temporarily feel good, whether it's scrolling social media or other websites that actually deplete our dopamine, and things like sunshine and breath work and fresh air and being with a friend are more authentic dopamine ways of creation. And you've got some dopamine in the new product. Is that what you're flashing?
Yeah, so this is our new product, which I'm really, really happy and excited about. It's our attention chews. I'm really, really excited about them. It's L-carnitine, tyrosine, taurine, glycine, zinc glycinate, B6, B12, and also it has blueberry extract, which is both functional and flavor. But all of these things together, the combination of them makes such an incredible attention focus product that really, and why it's that attention focused product is because it's triggering your dopamine and it's regulating your dopamine system there. And so, yes, I think it's like, I don't really think about dopamine depletion. I think about like kind of quality of dopamine, if you will, because you're still getting those hits of dopamine from the social media interactions and these smaller things. But like, it's kind of like saying that Zooms can replace hugs. And they can't when it comes to like actually feeling that like oxytocin from relationships. Or it's saying that gummy bears or gummy vitamins can replace food. And again, they can't. Like there are nutrients maybe in those gummy vitamins, and your body thinks that you're eating food, but it's not going to replace, fruits, vegetables, proteins, things like that. And so there are all these tricks that happen in our modern world where, we are animals, like back in our thinking is, hey, like these animals like didn't have to navigate fake social interactions on the internet, and they didn't have to interact with fake foods that are, on the shelves of our grocery stores. And now there are all these tricks that can happen in our minds that think like, oh, I'm actually meeting these needs. These needs are getting met. I'm getting everything I need. When in actuality, we're starting to become malnourished. And so I think thinking about the quality of dopamine that you're getting is really important. Like the sunshine, flowers actually increase dopamine. Things like that are really beautiful. Experience like listening to new music can be a great way. Exercise is great. And things we want to stay away from are like sugar, for example, which can also give us that dopamine hit, but isn't increasing the nourishment of that part of your brain.
I love that. I've never heard it talked about that way. It's about the quality of the dopamine. That's so great. I'm going to use that one. Thank you. I love to, in addition to all the amino acids you have in there that are just great for mental clarity and brain health, again, in like a calm, balanced way, which just feels so good. You've got the raw materials, like you mentioned, some of the other ingredients that just help everything work better. I want to make sure, in addition to your website, which we will link, you're now in a lot of really exciting stores. So share where else people can find your product.
Yeah, so the mood shoes and attention shoes are available in Sprouts nationwide. We're in Kroger. If you're in the Los Angeles area, we're in Erewhon and Bristol Farms. You can buy us online, and we're in Thrive Market, and we're really growing. There's a lot of really exciting stores that I can't announce yet that are coming in the next 6 months that should make it and my big North Star of everything that I want for our company and the work we're doing is accessibility, and to make it, there when you need it and where you need it most.
I have one final question for you, kind of touching on your North Star. Is there anything you want to share before that and before we wrap up?
The thing I care most about is empowering people to, be the owner and, the CEO of your body, if you will. Like, you are the owner, you are the authority, and I want everyone to feel empowered to make these choices, to do the research yourself, read as much as you can, learn to discern between good research, bad research, try to, maybe follow some great functional MDs online. There are really great ways to learn about your body now. And I think the more you can integrate it into your daily habits, whether it's following them on your social media channels, whether it's subscribing to newsletters, maybe buying a book. I think there's an amazing book called The Mood Cure by Dr. Julia Ross. Actually, she's not a doctor. She's a nutritionist and practitioner. But Julia Ross, it was so transformative for me in learning about neurotransmitters and like, what are these little signals? Like, really look at what are those signals that our bodies are giving us. Are you craving carbs? Are you craving alcohol? What are you craving? And those are little hints at, what does my body actually need? And the answer isn't carbs and alcohol. The answer is like, what are those functionalities? And the more we can learn about our bodies and the more you proactively look at, who am I? Like, what's going on within me? And what are these signals telling me? The more we can learn about how do we improve that through behavior, through nutrition, because it is possible to actually start living that life you want to, and to be able to, kind of do it all, handle it all, or at least have a smile on your face amidst the chaos.
Totally. I love that. I'm all about creating deeper connections with ourselves because, kind of like we talked about before we hopped on recording, the chaos of our days leading up to this, when we have that connection with ourselves, it's like you create this habit of checking in, right? It creates this like stop in that chaotic motion of, okay, what do I need? What can I tap into? And that present moment with yourself it's like each moment is an opportunity to shift how you feel and how your day goes. And I think that's so huge. And I love your passion for people understanding our brains and the neurotransmitters and what they do, because it's what's in us. It's so important. So thank you for that.
I'm not a doctor. I was a patient, and I wanted to know, like, what are these doctors trying to tell me to do? Is this really the actual best thing for me? Like, this person just spent 15 minutes with me, and I've been living with myself now for 30 some odd years. So you are the authority about what's going on in your body. So I think that is, we need doctors, of course, not to.
We need doctors. I think we all need to continue to understand the doctor within us. And I think it's also just really important to know that the doctors that we hire work for us. And if it's not working for you, you can fire that doctor and find another doctor, because we know what we need intuitively. And if they're not speaking our same language, we're not feeling seen or heard. That's not a relationship that we need to be, working with. And there's so much information out there to empower ourselves and create that, feeling of connection with what's going on. It's so important. Okay, one final question, Olivia. If you were to look back at your life one day in 100 years or however long you live, and you're so thankful that you created the biggest ripple that you could while you were here, what would that look like for you?
I'm so proud of the amount, like the millions of women that have found friends through the work I've done with VINA. So increasing that social fabric and connection, and like the trips and the family vacations and the bridesmaids and those memories, I think everything comes back to those friendships. And so I can really, I already know that I can look back and say, like, I'm so proud of that work. And, I think in tandem, people just preventing so many moments of kind of misery through increasing people's access to kind of preventative mental health tools. So those are the two things that I am so passionate about, and I already feel really proud about the impact that we're having on in the world, and really excited about how we're elevating and making moves in the overall mental health space through the work even outside of PIM that we're doing amidst advocacy, amidst increasing research with nonprofits that we're working with. So it's really thinking about, I think mental health is the core of fabric of everything that we're doing.
Love that. We'll make sure that we link your other companies below too, so that people have that as a resource, and perhaps we'll do a future podcast on that. I thank you. I think one of the things that you're also doing, perhaps without realizing it, is you're creating hope for people. You obviously went through some pretty deep tragedies, and from that, you've helped so many people, and we all have the ability to do that. I think we can, at some point, look at these things that we think happen to us and realize they're happening for us, and that we can go out and serve a mission and fulfill our calling. So thank you so much for being here. I've loved this conversation. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. You've now got so many more tools in your toolbox that you can use to help elevate your mental health. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. So many of us need to open up this conversation. These are things, feelings, emotions that so many of us struggle with and don't always open up to others about. So thank you for joining Olivia on this mission with opening up this conversation by sharing this episode. As always, if you liked it, I'd love for you to throw a like under it. Be sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and we'll see you soon.